Wonderful. Okay, so we're just after 2. I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today. My name's Gail Easton. I'm the Program Manager for the CDAP program across New South Wales. I would just like to start with acknowledging the rich cultural and spiritual connections of the Aboriginal people on the many countries in which we sit on today, and respectfully remember the footsteps of the ancestors who have walked this land before you and I, and for all of those who follow. So again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an overwhelming response yet again to the provision of learnings that we're offering and the information that we're offering to you as CDAP members. We value your time and we really appreciate the fact that you've taken time out to spend a little over an hour and a half with us today. I'd now like to just invite Amy Stevens, who will be presenting for us today, to take over.
Sure, thanks so much, Gail. So good afternoon. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope you're all well and safe, because I know that there's a lot going on in New South Wales at the moment, and I know that some people are regional. Just following on from what Gail had said, my name is Amy Stephen. I'm the Family Project Officer for Family Drug Support. My role is to deliver training sessions like this, and also to support the family members, carers and friends of some of those that are struggling with drug and alcohol issues. And I do that in various ways, and I'm going to talk about that as we go through this training session. So, practical strategies on coping with complex and chaotic situations. I want to give this a little bit of context. So this is in relation to the use of drugs and or alcohol, and this is specifically how we support family members, the friends and the carers of those that are struggling with it. Now, I don't know how many people we have got in at the moment, so I know that there's a lot of people registered. I would ask you all, just to echo what Gail had said, to keep yourselves on mute. And I'm going to attempt anyway to ask and get some feedback through the chat box. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up. I will try very hard to answer as many questions that come through as I possibly can. But if, however, I don't answer your question, my email address should be there just now, and at the end, please feel free to email me. And also, if you want me to put you on my contact list or refer you to my colleague who covers a lot of the regional areas of New South Wales, please just let me know what area and postcode that you're in, and I can refer you on to her as well. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do today. And I also want to give you a little bit of a snapshot of our Support the Family, Improve the Outcome Professional Development Day. We offer a lot of services, and I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a teaser for all of them so that you know what support is out there, and then you can feed that into your communities so that they're a bit more empowered, and we can kind of take a little bit of the load off as well. So within that, I'm going to chat about what goes on for family members, what the family's needs and expectations are, and how can we help. And then I'm going to chat about our Stepping Forwards information sessions, which is specifically for family members, carers and friends, and about our Stepping Stones course as well. And then if we have time at the end, then we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. So Gail has already acknowledged the traditional custodians of the land. We're all on different lands. I'm on Gadigal land today, so I want to acknowledge that. I just want to let you know that we're an inclusive support service for all families. So it doesn't matter what racial, ethnic, sexual, religious, or cultural identities anyone belongs to. Everybody is welcome within our service. This is Tony Trimmingham. Now, some people will know Tony, and some people will have heard of him. He set up Family Drug Support in 1997. And the reason he did that was his son Damien, age 23, tragically passed away from an accidental heroin overdose. Now, Tony's actually a relationship counselor, and he describes himself as a typical white middle-class family He came over from England. They settled in the Blue Mountains. Damien was one of three of Tony's children. And from what I've heard, Damien was pretty academic at school. He was a keen sportsman, and had he wanted to, he probably could have pursued something in that field. He was popular with friends, with teachers. He had a long-term girlfriend. He had a part-time job. But by all accounts, he was quite charismatic, a bit of a leader, and also a bit of a risk taker. And he experimented with drugs, and that unfortunately led to heroin use. Now, when Damien passed away, Tony was obviously traumatized and grief-stricken, and he was trying to find answers, and he desperately needed support himself. And what he found, that he was being passed from pillar to post, and that there was not a lot of understanding or empathy for what he was going through. And back in the 90s in Australia, I believe all over the media, there was huge stigma about drug users, with them being called junkies and scum and get them off our streets. So he actually said to me, you know, he's not a junkie, he was my son. And I think that's something that we all really need to keep in our hearts and in our minds about this. So Tony wrote to the Sydney Morning Herald because he was appalled at how he was treated and, you know, what was going on around him. And he got such a response to that he decided to call a public meeting in Ashfield. And just under 500 people turned up to that meeting. And he realized that there were so many people out there that were struggling in this journey with their person, that he decided to set up family drug support. And it has gone from strength to strength there. So the mission statement: to assist families throughout Australia to deal with drug issues in a way that strengthens relationships and achieves positive outcomes. And our philosophy is putting all our energy into primarily supporting families struggling as a result of that drug use, and empowering them to cope and survive the situation that they find themselves in. So here's a snapshot of all the services that we deliver. This one is our 24 telephone support line. This is by far the one that's got the most engagement, and is probably a great first referral for us. This is run by, is manned by our volunteers, most of whom have lived experience. Now, when I'm speaking to people in the support groups that I run, I will often say to them, if you're having a 2 a.m. moment and you need to talk to somebody, then this is the number to call, and someone will be on the end of that phone to listen to you. Now, we don't give advice, but certainly it's very therapeutic for people to be able to talk through what's in their head in the moment. We have our national and local support groups. We have 8 face-to-face ones in New South Wales, and we have 1 regional online one to reach those far and wide. The groups are an awesome space for people to come in and just be heard and not feel judged, and to feel understood by the people around them. People can come in there and they can say whatever they're feeling without being judged by people that just don't get it. They're great spaces, and I think I have many stories from my support groups, and I'll probably weave them through as we're going through the presentation. We have regular newsletters. We have when people become a member, they can get access to a one-on-one session with a staff member. We also have a quarterly insight magazine, and when they become a member, it's $30 for the year. They get a big glossy magazine with lots of information about drugs, their use, about treatment services, about boundaries, and a lot of people, the $30 is worth it just for that. We have a Stepping Stones experiential and psychoeducational course. I'm going to talk more about that at the end. And the same with our Stepping Forward information sessions. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them towards the end of the presentation. And we link families into treatment services where appropriate. I've already said we have about 120 volunteers who man the phone lines. And we also have remembrance ceremonies for those that have passed away. And Tony offers bereavement support because obviously he's experienced in that. So our core principles are in harm minimization, harm reduction. We want to keep people safe and alive. Where there is life, there is hope. And I think a lot of that is, we did a survey recently called Voices to be Heard, and the results of which were announced on our International Family Drug Support Day. And there was an overwhelming response from families that they support the initiatives of harm reduction. So I want to read out just what the International Harm Reduction Association defines that as. And it is the policies, programs, and practices that aim to reduce the harms associated with the use of psychoactive drugs in people unable or unwilling to stop. The defining features are the focus on the prevention of harm rather than on the prevention of the drug use itself. So that's been a principle of the Australian government's approach to drug use for several decades, when the first needle and syringe program was introduced. And had there been injecting rooms back in 1997, Damien Trimmingham may still have been alive today. And we're trying to get families to understand what those are. Some are very clued up, but some people need a little bit of education around what that is. Substance use is inevitable. I don't see it going away anytime soon. So we want to reduce those harms and support the people, again, keeping them safe and alive. We're very family focused, but we need to acknowledge and validate where families are and support them through that process. And we don't tell people what to do. People are the experts in their own lives, and we don't really have a right to tell them how they should be responding to things. I've heard of situations and scenarios that people have been in, and the logical mind that has never experienced any of this before would think, why did they do that? Or why did they make that decision? And the thing is, we're not in their shoes, we don't know. So we need to accept that. We don't give advice and we don't judge, because we just don't know. We're reality-based, and we recognize that there's different stages and substances. So for example, you might have somebody that comes into your service, or we have someone that comes into ours that has someone that's been using drugs for 20 years. It's polydrug use, and they have mental health diagnosis. And then you have somebody that's come in saying, my 14-year-old's just started smoking marijuana. Now, there's an analogy that Tony has about toothache, is that nothing hurts like your own toothache. So you might be sitting there and you need a filling and it really, really hurts, and you need to get to the dentist because that pain doesn't go away. And then you have someone else that needs a root canal who is also in pain and needs to go to the dentist. You can't compare. They're both in pain and they both can't think of anything else. And they both need support and ways to manage that pain. So we really don't compare, but we do recognize that there are different stages and we need to meet people where they are. We use a lot of solution-focused brief therapy when we're acknowledging the past and shifting focus onto strengths. And we need to create safety where people can express their emotion and try new approaches, which is often hard for some people. And we are all about self-care, about nourishing the self, about finding a balance in life, and taking care of themselves, because you cannot drink from an empty cup. And in order to support somebody else, you need to really take care of yourself first. So that's the heart and soul of family drug support. When I go through this presentation, I'm going to use the word family a lot, and I just want to let you know what I mean by that. So that can mean a nuclear family. It can mean extended family, which is aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins. We've also got blended families, step families, single parent families, non-parental primary caregivers. So that could be foster parents. It could be grandparents that are taking care of grandkids. Partners are included in that. Friends are included in that. And communities, because often in many different cultures, communities is regarded as family. So when I say that word, it encompasses all these people. I just don't have time to say this every time I'm mentioning it. So let me tell you about our Support the Family, Improve the Outcome Professional Development Day. I'm going to give you a little taster of what we do in this, and hopefully by the end of it, you will have some tools and strategies when engaging with families. First of all, can I just ask people to put in the chat whether you work directly with the user or with family? So if you work with the user, you can just type a U into the chat so I can differentiate. And if you work with families, then put an F. If you work with both, you can put UF, just please don't put FU. Both, okay. All right, it's kind of a mix. Right, both. Right, that's excellent. Brilliant. So a lot of people are working with both. What we do in our Support the Family, Improve the Outcome is we look at the stages of change for the user and for families. We look at the language that we use when we're interacting with families, and we'll also have discussions around what families need and want, what their expectations are, what challenges we face as professionals around that, how we communicate, and how this is called challenging your TAB. So TAB stands for triggers, assumptions, and biases. And it's really important that we all know what they are within ourselves. And then we go through some of the different theories and approaches that we use when working with families. Today, I'm going to talk about stages of change with you. I'll also talk about the language that we use and a bit about what families need and want, and a little bit at the end about communication as well. I am presuming that most of you have seen this and know it back to front, but I want to look at this from the perspective of families and how we explain this to families. So Prochaska and Di Clemente, this is a pretty well-known cycle that they've come up with. Families really struggle in this space. And if we can get them to understand what's going on for their person, they're more likely to be able to support them. Now, as human beings, we like to solve problems. We like to solve a problem, we feel pretty good about it. And it's just the way that our brain works. So for example, if our sink gets blocked, then the first thing we might do is get a plunger and try and unblock it that way. If that doesn't work, then we might go and get the salts or whatever and put that, the Drano, put it down there. If that doesn't work, you might call in your next door neighbor or your brother or whoever and try and get them to sort it out. If that doesn't work, then you call the plumber. So we go through all these steps to try and get a positive outcome. Now, with drug use, it's really not as simple as that. And when people feel that they can't do anything, they become very distressed. They start to feel helpless, they start to feel hopeless, and they start to feel really inadequate. And those are feelings that are very distressing and very uncomfortable. So when we're talking about this cycle, we want to get families to understand what they can do and what they can't do. So when we're talking about, and I'm explaining what the happy user is, so that's the phrases like, I'm all right, everything's under control, you're the one with the issue, you need to settle down. That person is not ready for any type of change because they don't think that they have an issue. And that's very frustrating. So we're asking families to look for cues that are about to move into ambivalence or contemplation, but also to get support for themselves, because this might be a bit of a journey that they're on, and also to get information about drugs and to get educated on what is out there so that they can provide information if and when that person asks for it. Who works with people that are in ambivalence? And just chuck an A in the chat if you have experienced that, whether that's, yeah, families or the user. How do people find that stage? How do people find working with ambivalence? How does it feel to work with ambivalence? Frustrating, very. Frustrating at times, yeah. Frustrating, that word's coming up a lot, yeah. Challenging. Geez, it really is. If we feel that as workers, how do family members feel? Off-putting? It's another one as well. They often don't understand it, and people can stay there for a very long time. So it's trying to get a little bit of empathy into that that stage for family. So I often liken it to the diet and exercise analogy. So you go to the doctor and the doctor says your bloods are all over the place and you probably need to cut out all the fatty foods, cut out the sugar, you know, go for walks. And someone says, oh, well, my auntie lived to 105 and she was all right. So that would be an example of it for just an everyday issue. And then we talk about someone saying, well, you know, maybe I do need to lose a little bit of weight. You know, I've not got a lot of energy, struggling to keep up with the grandkids, the kids or whatever. So yeah, maybe I do, but you know what? I've got Easter coming up and then there's that wedding, then it's my birthday, and they just keep putting it off. So that would be an example of ambivalence just in an everyday situation. And if somebody was to come in and say to them, as soon as they hear that, oh, I'm maybe I need to do something. Oh, well, that's it. I've emptied the cupboards. I've just signed you up for Jenny Craig. And that person's like, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I want. And then every conversation becomes about that person making a change that they're maybe not ready to do. And how does that feel if somebody was trying to push you into something that they don't want to do? So I always sort of suggest possibly you need to weigh it up. Use a little bit of motivational interviewing with them. And if you think someone's only 20% wanting to change and 80% happy to stay where they are with their drug use, then you need to tailor your response to that. Otherwise, they're going to dig their heels in and you're going to cause a separation. And then getting any kind of information out of them or having those conversations is going to be really difficult. And then we're also chatting about what people's goals are. And some people have no intention of giving up drugs or alcohol. So how do families cope with that? How do they understand that? When someone says, I'm not going to drink 5 bottles of vodka a week, I'm only going to drink 4, and they're horrified that this is a goal because it's still 4, but it's not 5. Or I'm going to continue to drink 5 bottles of vodka a week, but I'm going to do it at home. I'm not going to go to the pub and then get into a fight and then get in my car. And that would be an example of harm minimization, and getting people to sit with that and work through it themselves. And active listening comes up throughout all of this, and it's trying to equip family members with these skills so that they can support their person and feel like they're supporting their person and that they're actually contributing to something. I talk about lapse being the rule rather than the exception, and how we respond to it is very important. It's like if somebody slips up on their diet and they buy a chocolate bar, is that the end of the world? And then maybe they buy a chocolate bar every day from then on, and things are starting to get out of control. How do you support someone in that situation? Or maybe someone has a binge and eats all the chocolate and all the pizzas before they start again on Monday. And we don't have physical dependency on chocolate, maybe, or maybe we do, I don't know. But for someone that has a physical dependency on a substance, or a psychological or emotional dependency, it's much, much harder. So we all know that. It's trying to help families understand that and work out where their person is in that cycle. This is what happens for families. Denial, and then they'll move into emotion, and then into control, and then into chaos. And we're trying to help them cope with the situation. So let's go through some of this. Denial is that I don't really want to see what's happening. I didn't know what was going on. There's usually clues, but people don't want to see them. They want to trust their person. you know, you're not using drugs, are you, son? No, of course, I'd never be as dumb as that. Oh, thank goodness, because you don't want to believe it. Or, you know, it's just a phase that they're going through. It's, you know, hormones, if they're a teenager, or they've just broken up with their partner, they're not coping very well. Not really knowing a lot about drugs or alcohol, or knowing what the signs are. Didn't want to face it, or it can't be happening to us. That doesn't happen to us. We don't do that in this family. Usually something happens, whether that's you know, someone finds drugs in the house, or there's an arrest, maybe there's an overdose, and people go straight into emotions. So very confronting. What is going on? Feeling extremely overwhelmed. Anger comes out, and it masks a lot of other emotions. Those emotions can be fear. Is this person going to die? And that is a huge fear for a lot of people. A lot of shame around that, and guilt. Is this my fault? Have I not been a good enough parent? Have I not been a good enough partner? Have I not been a good enough son or daughter? And people really question themselves. And a lot of grief, a grief of what could have been. Grief that this beautiful person that they have loved and cared for might not have the life that they had hoped for them. And they're massive. And then people go into the control stage. So we were talking before about how we want to fix things. That's how we're wired. So the next thing is, all right, we're going to sort this out. And there's hard line, or the tough love, and a soft line. So I just want to say here that, first of all, tough love is issuing ultimatums. It's the my way or the highway. You need to stop using drugs, or I'm kicking you out this house. If you don't stop using drugs, then we're going to cut off money. And it's not supportive. It's very black and white. It's very inflexible, and it's actually, it's cruel to both the loved one and the person that's using, because it only creates winners and losers. It's not open communication, and it is not boundary setting. It's not trauma informed, and it doesn't work. The soft line is trying to look after everyone. So that's a lot of rescuing and colluding. It might look a little bit like somebody chapping the door 15 times in the morning to make sure someone gets up to go to school or college or to their job. It's, I just need to get you to the doctor. We'll sort all this out, and then they don't show up at the doctor, or we'll just get your dad's golf clubs out of the pawn shop and we won't tell him what's going on. And it's just trying to manage everything in the hope that in doing that, there is a, you know, there's a level playing field for people to get better. And it doesn't work either. They're both controlling, and it sends people into chaos when it doesn't work. So people are usually scraping the bottom of the barrel for energy at this point. They don't know what to do. They're saying, why can't we fix this? They don't have any support. They don't have any time out from this. They're blaming others in the family. They've run out of energy. They're at the point where they just feel they can't do this anymore. And that feeling of helpless and powerlessness. It's your fault. You've always been too hard on them. No, it's your fault because you've always been too soft. If there's siblings in that equation, they could be going, well, I'm over here and I'm doing okay, but no one's paying me any attention. And I also think you should have done this, this, and this. And things are out of control. That's when a lot of people come to us, is when they're feeling really chaotic. We're here to help people cope and to kind of work out what's going on for them. And that can start at any stage of this journey. So coping is about education. It's about working out what is going on, finding support for self, learning to set boundaries, learning what boundaries are, developing open and honest communication, and letting go of the need to fix things, letting go of an agenda to make somebody get better, and letting go of expectations around what may or may not happen. Letting go is a massive concept. We actually go into it in quite a lot of depth in our stepping stones 28-hour course, which again, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about towards the end of the presentation. So when families do that, they do find that they can cope better, become more resilient, and survive intact. We liken this as a bit of a metaphor. It's like walking a tightrope, where people are on this tightrope, so they've been pushed out. Everything that they believed was true and real and solid and foundational has suddenly dropped below them. And they just want to get off that tightrope. And it's a very frightening place to be. So we talk about a balance pole. So this is what people in the circus use to try and keep themselves balanced as they're walking through this. And the first instinct for people is to chuck that balance pole away. But we're saying that you need to really keep hold of that, because that's what's going to get you across. The balance pole is all the things that has made up somebody's life before drug use was discovered. So that's hobbies. That could be people that, golf, football, dancing, reading, walking the dog, going out with friends. All those things are usually the first things to go, and those are what keep people afloat. Families often need permission to do the things that they used to enjoy, because in their head, how can I possibly go to the movies? How can I possibly laugh with friends when my person is over here in absolute chaos? It doesn't feel right to them, but it's absolutely essential. And sometimes people don't want to do these things, and we say, do it anyway. Because if this is going on, you can't throw away your life to try and save someone else. You need to continue to live your life. And it's a really difficult balance for families, and we really do encourage that. Our support groups are really good spaces for people to encourage each other to do that. Evidence exists that family support is a key element in successful treatment outcomes. So many people that have come through dependency have said that if it wasn't for their family, then they wouldn't be where they are today. And those who work in the field of drug treatment prevention increasingly consider the families to be a key resource in harm avoidance and treatment. So they're part of the solution to what's going on. So I'm not sure how many people we've got in the session at the moment. So we've got 47, so that's quite a lot. What I would do when we run the support family workshop is we actually get people in groups and really discussing this, because everyone's got different experiences. But even if some people just want to put something in the chat just now, what do you think families expect when they come to your service? What are they expecting for you? And it might be different for different people in different roles. What do they expect? To fix all their problems immediately. Some direction, ideas, and hope. Yes, solutions. Respite, yes. Quick fix. Support. A miracle. Miracles, yeah. Depends, fix, connection, help, listen. So they might come in, because what they expect and what we can deliver are usually a little bit different. I guess our experiences are that they do come in exactly what you guys have been saying, is they want solutions. They often have quite high expectations. They want to know why. And we obviously can't give them that answer. What can we offer them? If this is what they expect, what can we do? Anyone? Listen, yeah, 100% listen, provide direction. Support. Educate. Psychoeducation and working towards a better life with them. Yes, that's awesome. Realistic expectations. Yes. Have as much knowledge as possible to help them. Hope through partnership. Yeah, these are great. Hopefully they're going to come out stronger. They're going to have their balance pole. because we can't deliver these things, but we need to get them to a place where they are feeling growth, where they are able to manage crisis. And this is all really firmly, foundationally rooted in reality. What do they need? They're kind of similar questions, actually. But what we're thinking is they come in and they want practical matters solved. Interventions, I've heard that quite a lot. I don't know if you guys have. Yeah, someone to listen, 100%. So we can't control what anyone else does, but we want those relationships with their person to improve, normalize. It's another good one there in the chat. Give them some consistency, clear communication. I think someone said that in the chat as well. Connection, support, reassurance, respite. So those are things that we can deliver. There's different ways that families access support as well. We have people that again, this is just on who we work with, but I'm sure you can all relate to this. We have people coming in that are engaged, they're really active, they're really motivated, and they're really educated. We have those coming in that are engaged but disadvantaged. So they're active and motivated, but they might have a lot of barriers, whether that's cultural or there's language or literacy barriers. And then we have those that are disengaged. So they're uninvolved, they're burnt out or very fearful of services. Now, it's not our job to make 2 and 3 become engaged if they're not engaged. But it's worth just bearing in mind that when referring people on, if you're working with the last 2 on this, for us anyway, maybe the first point of contact is the support line, because they're more likely to do that than come to a support group or a workshop. So sometimes it's about gauging where they are and how they might engage, so that they do even just a little bit, rather than a support group for a lot of people just doesn't suit them, depending on where they are in their journey. I'm going to also chat now about language and labels. When you see these words, what comes to mind? So when someone says the word addict, what is the first thing that comes into your head? When someone says addict, they're an addict. Shame, guilt, judgment, someone with an uncontrollable habit, yes. And I think stigma. And these are really important to bear in mind, because embarrassment, yeah. I think when we say addict, there's that once an addict, always an addict. And that simply isn't true. And it is a very shameful word. And a lot of families use it, and a lot of people that have a dependency will use that about themselves as well. But would it be refreshing for them to hear themselves being referred to in a different way? So you have a dependency. It's like if you have a broken arm, it's something that's difficult, and it's an illness. It's the same with the word clean. What's the opposite of clean? It's dirty. So how does someone feel if they're, if they haven't used for a while and then they have a drink, or, they take a drug? Does that suddenly mean that they're dirty? Does that then negate all the effort they've made before? How does a family member perceive that? And the same with rock bottom. And I've heard so many people say this, and what does it even mean? They've got to hit rock bottom. Well, how frightening is that for a family member to hear? Because for some people, they don't come back from rock bottom. And does it even exist? Some people don't need to hit a rock bottom to get better or to make progress. And some people think they've hit rock bottom, and then they hit another rock bottom. And then it's like, well, hang on, how many rock bottoms do I need to hit before I come back up? It's quite an unhelpful terminology to use. And the same with the word enabling. And that gets banded around a lot. And all that does is induce guilt in families. I was speaking to a lady whose son was using ice, and he lived with her. She was elderly. She was very frightened of him. He was verbally abusive. He would stay awake for days on end. He would be making animal noises. He'd be on all fours, howling at the moon. She had people coming to the door that really frightened her. He damaged property, thought there was someone on the roof. And she was frightened, and people were saying, you need to kick him out. You're enabling his drug use. You're enabling his behavior. And she said, if I kick him out, then within 3 or 4 hours, I know his phone will be dead. And I don't know whether he's lying in a gutter. I don't know whether he is been involved in an accident. I don't know whether he's been beaten up. I don't know whether he's breaking and entering. I don't know whether he's been arrested. And I don't know if he's alive or dead. And for her, that anxiety was far worse than having him in her home. Now, that's not to say that that situation was going to be workable long term, but at that moment, with the energy, resources, and knowledge that she had at the time, that's all she could do. And she needed support at that moment so she could make other decisions, so that she could work out what her boundaries were, and so that she could feel strong enough to maybe change that situation. But instead, she was made to feel really guilty by other family members and friends. So we don't always have the whole picture. And it's the same with the word codependent. It's, you know, everyone has a right to their feelings, and, you know, people can seem obsessed with the person, but it's their person and they love them. And they have all these different feelings of anxiety and grief. And we've been taught to think that, you know, we're such an individualistic society, and that any kind of codependence is pathological. And it's just, you know, they see people disappearing before their eyes, and they're grief-stricken. And codependent, it's not a helpful word for a lot of people. Our language creates our reality, and their words can create an identity. And we need to really remember that this is someone's son or daughter, partner, parent, or whoever, and they love them and they care about them. And these labels are far from helpful. Listening. So when we're listening to families, most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And again, as services, we're all very, very busy. So when you've got a whole caseload of work to do, and somebody phones and they need to talk, do you have 5 minutes? Most of us don't have a lot of time. But how long does it take to actually listen? So when we're trying to formulate an answer to something, we're not actually listening to what's being said. So what's the policy when family members phone? Do you have to refer on? Do you pass them on to another colleague? Do you give them 5 minutes? What's going on in your head when that happens, or when they come into your office, or whatever? And it's important that we're reflecting on that as well. And sometimes we want to put things right. We want to, in order to kind of end the call, maybe, or the interaction. So we want to tell them what to do. And that's called the righting response. And we can't solve other people's problems for them. So one thing that we do, and what our phone line volunteers are trained to do, is use affirmations. You've called the right service. When they're talking, that was brave of you. It must be very difficult. It's quite normal what you're experiencing. So things like this can, you know, if they're delivered with empathy, can actually do the trick in a lot of situations as well. And it takes away that need to try and put things right or tell someone what to do. So I'm going to now go through some of our stepping forward sessions. Our stepping forward sessions are delivered within the community. I've got one coming up in Burwood within the next couple of months, and if anyone does want information of that for their communities, then please let me know, and I can send you the information when I've got it. They are they're open, they're workshops. People don't have to speak if they don't want to. They were designed that way so that people that are still feeling that shame and stigma don't have to sort of speak up or say anything that they might do in a support group. And we provide lots of education on different subjects. So we talk about the stages of change, which I've spoken about earlier on. Again, effective communication. Most people think they're really good communicators. And there's a lot in that, and a lot to break down within that. Alcohol and other drugs. We look at treatment services. Our boundaries one is very popular. That's what people ask for the most. Conflict resolution and families and I. And we're also developing other ones as we speak to add into this. So with the stages of change, we go into this in a lot more detail. So we look at the for the person using, for families, we talk about the balance pole, and we also talk about that concept of letting go, what that looks like and what that is and what that isn't. With communication, what works and what doesn't. Listening, most people don't listen very well. Again, we'll talk about the language that people use, and using I statements. And it's so simple, but people don't realize the power of their words and how they can change dynamics if they just simply change the you to an I. And we do a lot of practicing of that throughout that. And this way it helps people, I wouldn't say prevent de-escalation, but it can certainly go a long way to, I suppose, maintain a little bit of connection. And that's one thing that I will reinforce throughout, is it's connection before correction. With a lot of people, you cannot try and correct behavior if you're not connected to the person, because they're not going to listen. And the connection is what people want the most, and it's trying to find a way to do that. Our alcohol and other drug information, we cover a lot on harm minimization and the why. And a lot of people want to know why, because they think if they know why, then they can sort it all out. They'll just go back to the reason that someone began using drugs or drinking alcohol, and they'll sort it, and then that'll fix it up here. And often the reality of that is that people don't really know why they started in the first place. And maybe the reason they started is not the reason that they're doing that now. And it really does consume people. So we talk a lot about that as well. We've got a session on drug treatment and recovery. Family members have all sorts of feelings when someone goes into treatment. First of all, it could be that sense of relief and hope, looking forward to the respite, or if they've seen their person go into treatment a number of times, then they might not have too much hope, and it's kind of a little bit around, oh, here we go again. There's a lot of anxiety. There can be resentment, questions of will it work? What happens if they leave? Because a lot of people will have their person on the phone. I don't want to stay here, get me out of here. Is this just a smoke screen? Is there going to be any real changes here? Is it just going to be the same old? And will I be left behind as they change? And this can be something that's really prevalent for partners, is when somebody comes out of treatment, and I've heard this in my groups, is that person has got a different view of life and a different pace to try and take care of themselves. And often partners think they're just going to be back on the same trajectory, and things have changed for them, and that there's a lot of grief and confusion around that. What will happen when they get out? Respite is a good time for family members to gain support and get a little bit of self-care if they can be supported and given permission to do so. Boundaries, they're not as simple as people believe that they are. We really pinpoint what a boundary is and what it isn't. We look at motivations for setting boundaries, because if somebody's setting a boundary in the hope that somebody will give up their dependency, then they've set themselves up and their person up to fail. How do you set a consequence? How do you set a realistic consequence? How do you follow through with that consequence? And there's all these complexities to boundaries, and people find it really difficult. And they'll often say, well, I've tried it and it doesn't work. And we try and encourage them to look at the situation again, try it again, and maybe try adding it or tweaking to it to see if it works a little bit different the second time. We go through planning tips around this. How is the person going to respond? How do you set up the conversation? What's negotiable? What's not negotiable? How do you involve them in that as well? And then conflict, getting people to really tune into their own conflict styles. How do you manage it? What was happened in your family? What happens in your in the current situation? How do you negotiate to get a win-win scenario? And a lot of this is self-awareness. And there's this question, who is right? Because there are so many complexities and nuances and different ways of looking at the picture. So is there a right? Is there a wrong? I don't know. Our Stepping Stones course is offered to families. It's 28 hours. It's experiential. We go through all the different emotions because people can't put in place the strategies and skills if they haven't dealt with the emotions. It's very intense. It's group work, it's closed. It's an end-to-end process, so people have to stay for the full duration. And we do questionnaires, so we measure anger, how people are handling it, boundaries, control, is there too much or too little of it, denial, where are they in that, what's happening with the rest of the family, how are the rest of the family coping, how they feel about themselves, how do you rebuild trust, because trust is a two-way street. Often people talk about not being able to trust the person that's using, but does the person using trust them? If you've gone through all their belongings and stalked them on social media and you know, gone to their friends to try and ask where they are and what they're doing, then you know, trust isn't there from their perspective either. And a lot of people are surprised by that. Overall coping and resilience is our final measure. And we do pre and post course results, and all participants get a personal letter from the facilitator afterwards, explaining their results to them. And we find that Stepping Stones is likely to help family members cope more effectively with long-term substance misuse, and that improvements in coping and well-being are likely to be sustained over time. So I've come to the end of the presentation. I have whizzed through that. So somebody's just asked what the charge is for Stepping Stones. I believe it's for Stepping Stones. So they have to be a member, which is $30 for the year. And the only charge that we have is $40 for the workbook. So that's pretty good value for 4 days of training. So thank you very much for coming along. Do we have any questions?
Certainly like to open it up to questions, Amy, that we've got a little bit of time there. So please either jump into the chat or pop your hand up using the reactions, and we'd certainly love to hear from you of what else we can provide you this afternoon. Quiet bunch.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I saw something about in one of the slides about triangulation. I was just wondering what that was.
So triangulation is it's the Karpman triangle. So when people become triangulated, it's about how we communicate, and for people to be really aware of their roles when they're going into communication. So for example, we have a victim, we have a persecutor, and we have a rescuer. And that what happens is when two people are that a relationship is becoming unstable and there's tension, people want to draw a third person in to balance it out. So I guess a crude example of that would be, or I suppose it can be a bit like manipulation as well. A child goes and asks mom permission to do one thing and she says no, so they go and ask dad, and dad says yes, not knowing that mom's already said no, and then they fight. That would be sort of one, that's a bit more of a manipulation. But somebody, a mom could be coming in and saying to the son, you've been using drugs again, what do you think you're doing? You've lied to us, blah blah blah. So she's the persecutor and he's the victim. Then dad comes in and says stop shouting at him, it's all okay. So he's then become the rescuer, and then the son says, I don't know what you're talking about, blah 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 blah. So the sons then become the persecutor, the dad's become the rescuer, and mom says, don't you shout at your father like that. And it's just, the triangles create winners and losers. They don't really solve anyone, and people have got to be aware when they're being triangulated and trying to keep communication as direct as possible. And then if you have siblings or grandparents that are in the mix as well, then you can get lots of little triangles all over the place, and the communication becomes so complex that it's very difficult to kind of work out who's where and what position people are taking, and it splits people apart. So we do go into that in the support the family module, and we also go into that in the effective communication stepping forward.
Awesome. It's a really cool concept. I've never heard of it. Thanks for that.
No worries. So I've got a couple of questions. The Stepping Stones program we're going to be running some in Sydney soon. I'm not sure, we're just back face to face after working from home for 8 months. So we're trying to get all these things back up and running. Hopefully we'll have some run in regional areas as well, but I think the next one will be in Sydney for sure. Someone's also asked if the slides are available after the presentation. Yeah, I can do that. You can email me if you would like.
Amy, we'd be happy to email those out, as well as everybody that's registered with us today. We have their email addresses.
Okay. All right, I'll put mine in as well. If anyone has any questions, then please just feel free to email me. Does the Stepping Stones program have an online presence, thinking for remote people to access it? At the moment, no. The reason that we don't do that is the absolute magic in that group is the group process, is the participants, it's how they relate to one another, and we can't get that if it's online. We may do other stuff, and I have run stepping forward sessions online before, and again, I can make sure that people, if you email me, then I can make sure that you're on my list for when the next one comes up. And someone's asked, Gail, will we be emailed the recording as well?
Just responding to that in the chat. What we will do is we will be uploading the recording to our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to definitely go back in and have a listen to it. It'll be made public for everybody. So definitely you can go back and have a listen to it, and encourage others, if they're interested, to also tap into that. So we'll, like I've said, we've got your email addresses. We'll let you know once it's uploaded onto YouTube.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any hands up or anything.
Are there any other questions or queries that you'd like to take the opportunity to ask of Amy whilst we've got some more of her time?
Okay.
Hi, my name's Claudia. I work for the Salvation Army Youth Link First program. So I'm a drug and alcohol case manager for young kids 12 to 25. I've come along, I've been working now in this field for 4 years, but I've come across a lot of young kids that are got borderline personality disorder. And I've kind of done a lot of training around it to try to get my head around it, because obviously it goes back and forwards with drugs and alcohol and mental health. But I just find that the borderline one kind of has a very negative take in the community and also in the system, so to speak, both ways, through drug and alcohol and mental health. And I was just wondering, like, even like support from family can be quite difficult, because families obviously don't understand it and don't know how to help a young person. So I'm kind of just wondering, do you offer that support for families and for young people, just for me to be able to have another outlet for them for support?
If there's drug use, then yes, we can always support family members. And very often I would say that family members that are the person they're supporting usually does have mental health issues as well, and borderline personality disorder has come up in the past. So again, we can't solve anything, but we definitely can hold those spaces where people can get support. And a support group is great for that, because you have an array of people that are in there that are experiencing very similar behaviors and feelings and anxiety around that. So whilst we can't do behavior management plans or anything, it's about helping people become more resilient, and to know what they can do and what they can't do. And we do a lot of perspective shifting as well, so that when people are really stung or really struggling with their emotions, how do they tune into themselves? How do they manage what's being thrown at them? Which is with any drug or alcohol situation as well. So I would say definitely, Claudia, still refer to us if you feel that that's appropriate for them, because it's not, they wouldn't be alone in that space of dealing with drug use and mental health issues. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah, because a lot of the time, like, trying to kind of provide the support for a young person, but then also try to connect them back with family, so that family can get a better understanding of what's happening. And it's really quite difficult when a young person can't understand what's happening, and it's like this kind of constant same routine that happens. They'll go to hospital for mental health because, the drugs have affected them, they've gone to psychosis or backwards and forwards. And so it's just maybe having someone that can kind of put it into perspective for them that is outside of that. And that's why I thought this service might just give them that support and that kind of shift in focus.
Yeah, and as I said, they're not alone in that space of mental health and drug use. So while we would focus on, we're there to support people that are supporting someone with drug use, it's there, and it's there a lot.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for the question.
A really great question too, Amy, of the complexities that are actually faced out there at the front line of people. And what we do know is we're seeing those changes occur with the complexities that are occurring in life these days as well. There's higher levels of anxiety and drives towards the trying to find something to calm the nerves, and potentially not the most healthiest either. So thank you so much, Claudia. It was a really great question. Is there anybody else that has something that they'd like to seek some clarification on or share with all of the other attendees that are here? It's as we know, through the collaborations of what we experience on the ground and sharing that, it can often help others as well. Might give them all an early mark, Amy.
Thank you. It's our support for the children. Now, the youngest that I've had at a support group anyway is, I think, 17 or 18. And I guess the reason we don't really, children know when we have our support groups, there's a lot of trauma that comes up in them. And I don't know that it's suitable for somebody younger, but we would sort of take that on a case-by-case basis. I would say no younger than 16, unfortunately, just because of what's going on in there. But we are trying to develop some more stepping forward sessions on how people support children rather than us delivering the support directly. So I guess we're not the service for supporting children, unfortunately. But it's a good question, because I do get asked that a fair amount. Please feel free to, if anyone wants any brochures or anything, please again email me and I can get lots of information sent out to you. We're all over Australia as well. So for some people, you do get people you get family members that are in different states, where, we operate in Victoria, Queensland and South Australia. And we have our regional online groups as well. And I think that's really important for people that are quite remote. Our website has so much information. I'll put that in. Oops. And that's got all the information about our support groups, our stepping forwards, our stepping stones, and where families can go for support.
The other thing that we might look to do, Amy, is the regional forums are coming up very soon as well. So with you and I being in close proximity geographically, I'll grab a handful of the resources as well, and we'll take them out to the forum so that they're made available to those that are in attendance on that day. But by all means, please jump onto the website. The other resource that you made mention of is the Power of Words, which is a fabulous little flip chart. Here's one I've prepared a little earlier. So a wonderful little flip chart that takes you through the language and how it is that you can change the way that you show up and have those conversations to help reduce that stigma of what actually impacts on people as well. Terrific. Thank you to everyone for your thanks. And if there aren't any more questions, then we might wrap it up there as well. But Amy, I'd just like to say thank you again. It's always wonderful to have the conversations with you. And Amy and I have had a few conversations in the time that the CDAP program's been under the consortia management. We look forward to working more closely with you in times to come. Just like to encourage everyone, Amy's made it her contact details available to you. We will make sure that in the captions on YouTube that we link back to the Family Drug Support website as well, so people will know. They'll have those hyperlinks in there. But yes, I'd just like to thank everybody for their time this afternoon. I know that everybody has competing demands, but I hope that you've found it helpful. We always find it very helpful indeed. And just thanks again to everyone, but thank you as well, Amy.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Our pleasure.